too. They start to panic when at the 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock after work rush. When I just ran there, there's like, in the 3 districts, there's like nobody there. District 1 is unbelievable. It's just, but they should make it. I had got extra dollars for them. I tried to factor all that in.
I did have a pretty good time. We had a good time. It was perfect weather too for the
It very
fall
well
up there.
could be, yeah.
I actually love up there.
Yeah, you never know sometimes what drives stuff exactly, but
It's pretty color. I mean, the
Yeah.
colors were mostly gone, but you know, I did some big ass bonfires and put up a bunch of wood and stuff.
Everybody bangs the gong when it goes first.
Oh, that's west.
burger.
That number second.
Did finance go okay? Oh, that's kind of what I figured.
Tonight it was just boom, boom, boom. Everybody was happy about it, so.
Well, we're not really.
No, we're not. But it's, a lot of times there's discussion.
Right.
Here I volunteered. I did. Yeah, I volunteered.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I love that.
We had one of the one that wasn't.
Why?
Oh, Hannah. Used to the new person.
That's what he said.
Oh,
He
he
said
was.
he worked out,
Yeah.
good.
Offered, I took him up on it.
Are you messing with Kevin?
Okay, ready? Okay, I'd like to call the common council meeting in order for November 6th. It's been appropriately noticed.
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray.
I'm here.
Alderman Kavieski.
Here.
Alderman Miller.
Here.
Alderman Rozak.
Here.
Alderman Shaw.
Here.
Alderman Ellis.
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Hey, first,
Alderman Swartz, sorry. Sorry about
Forget
that.
about me.
I kind of,
first item on the agenda is a public hearing. The purpose of the hearing is to hear public comment on a proposed 2019 city budget. Laurie, you going to give a presentation on that?
Yep.
After the presentation, then public comment is welcome on the budget.
Okay, so I've got a presentation here just to summarize what's in the budget. Excuse me. So the budget public hearing tonight is to present the 2019 budget that was recommended for approval by the Council Committee of the Whole last month on October 9th. The annual budget is what determines the services that the city will provide and how they're funded. It also sets the property tax levy needed to fund the services that are identified. So that's really what we're here for at the end of the year, to approve that budget and set that tax levy. Included in the budget is all the funds of the city, the biggest fund being the general fund, which houses all of our operations. Other funds that are directly affected by the levy that we talk about tonight are the debt service fund and the capital projects funds. When we take a look at the budget, the first thing we have to look at are what are our restricting factors? What are the things that are leading how we can put our budget together? And the biggest of those factors is the state levy limits. The levy limits is really broken into two parts. So I'm going to talk about both parts. The first and biggest part is really our net new construction. Our levy can increase by law 0% or our net new construction. The second part is an additional levy adjustment, and that is something that was set up by the state so that we can make our debt service payments. So that's really an adjustment for debt service, and we'll talk about each of those. The first one, as I said, is net new construction. So net new construction for us means how much construction did we have in 2017 that's measured on January 1st of 18 that works towards our 2019 budget. So as you can see, there's a little lag time built into that. Net new construction for this year is 3.85%, which is the highest that we've had since 2009. That 3.85% translates into about $78 million increase in the value of property in the city, and about exactly $331,396 that we can increase our levy. The second of those factors, as I said, is for debt service. Currently, the city's debt capacity is $113 million. The city has debt outstanding of $13.5 million. So our debt ratio is 13% of our capacity. The debt service levy includes the dollars needed for principal and interest payments for next year. In 2018, we took out new debt, or we are in the process of taking out new debt of $3.7 million, $1.5 million for street improvements, and $2.2 million for the acquisition of the Old Century site. That translates to a $229,028 increase in the levy for debt service. That's the amount that we need to pay next year. Other things that we look at in the budget. So net new construction, like I said, that amount that we had, $331,000, what do we use that for? We use it for general fund operations and for capital investment. So when we take a look at that general fund budget, we need to find out how much of that do we need, how much of that levy do we need to balance our budget. We look at other things that affect the general fund budget. That includes changes to our revenues and changes to our expenditures. So this year, we saw some revenue changes, which included a decrease in the amount of state transportation aids that we're getting and a decrease in the cable franchise fees that we're getting. However, some of that is offset by an expenditure restraint payment that we are receiving in 2019 and an increase in interest revenue because of the interest environment right now is so much better than it has been in the last few years. For expenditures, we take a look at what decreased. We had a really large decrease this year, and that was in the city portion of health insurance. That was an unexpected decrease for us. It amounted to savings in the general fund budget of about $146,000. When we took a look at that $146,000, since we didn't need to spend the net new construction on operating anymore, the suggestion was to move that over to capital, and I'll talk about that just a little bit later. Another decrease in expenditures that we had are our workers' compensation costs, which have been decreasing over the last couple of years. Increases to the budget include the annual COLA this year at 2.5%, and the only other real major increase in expenditures was in the cost of salt, in our salt contract for this year. Overall, after all the pluses and minuses, the amount needed, the amount of that net new construction, the amount of that $331,000 that we needed to balance the general fund budget was $72,228. The remaining part of the net new construction then went to capital. So in 2019, we have levy-funded capital initiatives that include about $2.2 million. That's $2.2 million levy-funded capital improvements. That's an increase over last year of $260,364. So that's where our net new construction went, $72,000 to general fund, $260,000 to capital. So now let's take a look at how does that affect everything. We look at our tax levy. That $331,000 net new construction increase, and I broke it down up there for you again, general fund 72, capital 260,000. In addition, that levy adjustment for debt service that we have to pay next year of $229,964 gives us a total levy increase of $561,360, or 5.2%. When we take a look at that 5.2% and then translate that into what does a citizen have to pay on their tax bill, then we look at the bottom line for the mill rate increase. So 5.2% levy increase translates to a 2.8% increase in the city's tax rate. Why is that? That's because of net new construction. What that means is that that amount of levy is spread out over more value, keeping the actual mill rate lower than the levy percentage. Okay? So the mill rate increase in dollars and cents is 15 cents over last year. So last year, our mill rate was $5.50. This year, we're looking at $5.65. Of that 15 cents, 5 cents of that is for operating and capital, and 10 cents or 11 cents is for, 10 cents is for the debt service, okay? Another interesting thing to look at, it's 5 cents for operating capital, but the dollars that we're spending, the levy dollars that we're spending for general fund operations is actually going down, and the capital dollars are increasing. That total 15 cents, total tax change on the average home in Oconomowoc translates to about $37. Again, about $12.25 of that for operating and capital, and $24.50 for the debt service. At the end of the day, the council, after their workshop, recommended for approval our 2019 general fund or City of Oconomowoc budget, which is a balanced budget. That, number one, provides for all of the services that the City of Oconomowoc citizens have come to expect, and number two, is within our legal levy limits. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Lori. I'd like to open up to public comment now. Is there anybody that has public comment regarding the proposed budget? Any comments? State your name and address, please.
My name's Sheila Homburg, and I sent the aldermen and women a letter this week. I'm the library media specialist that serves on the library board, and I just wanted to put a face to the letter. And I just want you to reconsider funding the $600 for the Wi-Fi hotspots. I feel like in 2018, this is a small price to pay to equalize the digital divide. The Wi-Fi hotspots, there's actually only 5 of them. So $600 funds 5 of them. And the library board that were attending voted unanimously to put this into the budget. So I just wanted to put a face to
Thank you.
Oops.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the budget? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and we'll move on to regular business. First item is approval of meeting minutes from October 2nd, 2018. We need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski. Alderman Miller.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to comments and suggestions from citizens. You can speak on any item at all. I have one comment card. Allison Tierney.
My name is Allison Tierney. I live at 820 Thackeray Trail, and my concern is regarding the possible extension of Thackeray Trail. And my concern is not necessarily related to the city's budget and how it's going to pay for it, but the costs of us as a working family and the other families on Thackeray Trail, that if a sidewalk was put in, how we would pay for that as working family members and middle-class citizens, and how we are already pinching for pennies with student loans and mortgage. And the reason that we moved out to Oconomowoc from Wauwatosa is really for the reason for affordability for our family. And if we had to pay for a sidewalk put in, and even if there was a loan that we could take from the city, if a small interest rate, that would be really tight on our budget. And I just want the council members to consider that and how it affects working class families and personal budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Just state your name and address.
I'll fill one out.
Yeah.
Jerry Erdman, 372 River Bluff Circle. Thank you, Your Honor, and Alderman, for allowing me to speak. I didn't know much about this Thackeray Trail, that this is on the agenda this year. I haven't been paying attention, but I just want to let you know that I think a lot of citizens, but speaking for myself, I'd like to see this happen. I'd like to see this road go through. I moved to Oconomowoc in 1967. I was so big, I didn't know much about Thackeray Trail at that time, but from the mid-'70s, I had heard that this was gonna go through, and I remember my mother always talking about it and always looking forward to the day that that was gonna go through, and now it's, 45, 50 years later, and we still don't have this road. I think it's poor planning not to connect roads. I know there's a few people that live on the road that think it will affect them, but there's 15,000 people in the city, and it affects all of us, and roads should connect, and it's poor planning not to connect roads. I remember back in the 1990s when we had, Target coming in, everybody stormed City Hall, and, there was gonna be trucks lined up all the way out through 94, and all the smog was gonna kill the kids at Summit School, and all the pollution was gonna get into Silver Lake, and people have all these visions of how bad it's gonna be, and it never turned out that way. Everything was fine after it went in. And I think, there'll be some traffic on that road cutting through between Silver Lake Street, but it really is something that I don't think is gonna be a huge, people just have visions that it's gonna be all this traffic all day long cutting in front of their home, but it's a public road for the benefit of all the citizens in Oconomowoc, and if you do not connect these roads, it's just bad planning. And I think we have to look at all the citizens, not just 40 or 50 people that live in that area when we make these decisions. And I really would ask, the rest of us don't pay attention to things like that because, it's something that I don't read the paper and watch these agendas all day long. But I really would ask the city to seriously consider approving any budget or approvals that are needed to connect these roads and do the right thing for proper traffic and for everybody in the city. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, yeah. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next item is the consent agenda. There are several items on the consent agenda, licenses, and then there are 3 electric utility easements. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to Finance Committee. 3 items. First item is consider act and resolution to contract for retail development consultant. We need a motion to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Lori, you want to you can go through all 3 of them, and then we'll just take them one at a time.
Sure, okay. So these are the cities, and we call them continuing resolutions. These are resolutions to contract for services on an as-needed basis. They include 3 resolutions, the first one being for our retail development consultant. The only change in that resolution is it no longer specifically states Pabst Farms, so that he can be used in other areas. The second one is for the city's labor attorney, who we use on an occasional basis this year for the police union contract. And then the third one is for our land surveyor, Lake Country Engineering. If there's questions, I'll answer them.
Great, thank you. So we'll go through the first one. We have the motion for the resolution for contract for retail development consultant. Any questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Call the roll.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Next item is consider or act on a resolution to contract for professional services for a labor attorney. We need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Lori already explained what that is. Any questions? Seeing none, call the roll.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Okay, and the next item is consider or act on a resolution to contract for professional services for land survey and property description services. We need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Okay. Under new business, first item is consider act on proposed 2019 city budget. We have it out there as consider act. We can do it in two ways, depending on how we want to handle this. Just to let everybody know how this has worked, we met several weeks ago to go through this budget, which is in this book, page by page, and what was presented tonight was what was approved at our committee of the whole meeting. If there are specific amendments that an alderman would like to make, tonight's the night to do that. And I put on the agenda, consider or act. We don't have to vote on it tonight on the entire budget. We can. If we don't vote on it tonight, we vote on it in 2 weeks. So what my proposal is here is that we take, if there's any amendments or any discussion that aldermen want to have, we go through that, we vote on the amendments, and then we move forward. Okay? So, again, let's open it up for discussion, and who would like to start?
I'm happy to start.
Everybody looks at Matt.
We received a memo from Lori on October 15th, which, thank you, Lori, for putting that together. It was, I know, a lot of efforts, and I asked a lot of questions. I think almost all the questions in there were questions I posed to you and the mayor and the city administrator about the budget. And I think that probably the easiest way to do is just step through the memo and my questions, and then I guess whoever needs to respond can respond. The first question I had was about non-COLA pay increases. So this is in pay increases for city administrators and other department heads. It looks like we have $5,600, and that's only for Fry, Conan, Gallo, and Black. Is that correct? Okay. What about city administrator? Is there a pay increase for city administrator in this budget? Okay, so she's getting the same 2.5%. Okay. I don't necessarily have a huge issue with that, but I think in future budget years, that should maybe be a little bit more, is it somewhere else highlighted? Other than in just each department, I think it would be more efficient for us to see what all the department heads are getting. I think it just makes it easier for us to decide whether or not that pay increase is appropriate. The next item is probably going to be a little bit more controversial that I have a question about, and that's the actual dollar amount of the 2.5% COLA increases. We're over budget this year, which you know I have a huge hang-up with for a variety of reasons, but we have a 2.5% COLA increase. So I want to know, have there been years past where we haven't had COLA increases at all? You guys know?
There has, but it's been a number of years. I'd have to go back and look at the specific detail of that.
Are they always 2.5%, or do
No.
they vary?
They vary.
Okay.
You know, we look at various factors, what the market rate is doing, what are other communities doing, so that we can stay competitive. We look at the WERC cost of living that they use as a guide for union negotiations, and take those considerations into account when we're looking at the COLAs.
So one of the parts of my email that didn't kind of reflect back into this memo was, I've asked for the last couple of years for us and the departments in the city to provide us information about what could potentially be cut. So not just the budget that we were presented with, but something else that says, look, here's 2 things we could live without this year if we wanted to try to do a no tax increase. Or here's and I've also suggested in the past, and this is for the last 2 years, why don't we have the departments also tell us what they really would love if we would love to raise taxes as much as we could. You know, so we really want a brand new street sweeper again. And that's going to increase taxes by 2.5% over the whole city, but we really want it. So I've said both ways. What I'd like from the departments is both what they could live without this year if we wanted to cut taxes or keep it levy neutral, and what we really want if we're all really happy and the economy's going great and we have a ton of net new construction. We've never really gotten that, and I think in future years I'd like that. And what I'm going to suggest is that the COLA increase be cut. I'm not going to move to cut it right now because I want to kind of walk through some of these other problems in the budget. But I guess what I'm curious about too is how many other COLA increases have we had, and have they been, like last year, was it 2.1%? Was it 3%? Do we know? What, so we picked 2.5 because just
I can explain how we
know.
came to the 2.5.
Yeah, how do we come to that?
Tony in our HR department looks again at other communities. What we're seeing with other communities is a range from 2 to 2.5%. We also looked at the WERC cost of living this year, which was 2.25%, which is the guide that they use for union negotiations. So that, that's a CPI type look that they're looking at. So those are the two first factors we looked at. In addition, this year, we have the health insurance changes. And if you'll recall, as Lori highlighted, there's a savings to the city that we're going to be receiving about $146,000 savings, but there's an increase to the employees. So, and that can vary depending on the plan that they choose, but there's multiple qualified plans in there. So the employee cost for health insurance is going up. In order to make employees whole, I would have to give a 3% COLA to offset this, the overall increase that employees will be paying towards their health insurance.
So you're saying our donation to health insurance went down, but their
Yes.
donation went up?
That's correct.
Why did that occur?
It's a factor of the low-cost plan. So we're part of the state health insurance plan, and there's multiple plans within our county that are eligible plans. And then the state determines what that is. And this year, like last year, our low-cost plan was Quartz, and they had a certain premium. And this year, Dean is the or I should say this year, 2019, Dean will be the low-cost plan, and their premiums are lower. So the city is receiving a reduction, but the employee portion will range and will go up.
It depends on what they choose in the
Yes,
plan? Okay.
yes. So if you stay with, as an employee, if you stay with a low-cost plan, you know, your monthly for a family will go from $19 to $50 a month. But if you stay with the same plan, stay with Quartz, it goes from $19 to $307 a month. Okay. So depending on what employees choose, there's a variety of impacts there. So that was part of the factor of determining the recommendation for the COLA.
Can I ask
Okay.
a quick, can I ask quick to clarify this for me? So with the health insurance increase that the employees are going to have to pay and the 2.5% COLA increase, their take-home pay is not going to be going up?
Correct.
At all?
Correct.
It's actually going down?
Going down.
Okay.
Yeah, I would need to provide a 3% COLA to
Okay.
to make it whole, to make them whole.
And since we've received $146,000 back less, this is just a little bit to kind of offset that cost.
And
Helps.
that's helpful in evaluating that, because we didn't have that information the other day, so I appreciate that explanation. I think that helps explain why that increase is in there. I still think in a year where the budget is high and we're increasing taxes, that we should, still consider those things. But I'm going to skip on to number 3. I asked for an explanation out of the Fund for Parks 210 on engineering. The explanation in here is still, to me, not quite there. John, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I've got examples of recent projects, which is not helpful, and then I get kind of the same explanation we got at the budget cycle, which again is not very helpful, because it just says, strategic future development opportunities, et cetera, but it's not really telling me what. I mean, we're earmarking 30 grand, and I want to know why. I mean, do we have some other projects out there, or are we just dumping money into this?
That's a good question, Matt. Thank you. A little too close, sorry. We have a series of strategic planning initiatives that the Common Council went through, and I can walk through each of those if you'd like. The first one is the development of the Northeast Regional Park. So for us to do the engineering design work for grading, trail development, landscaping, to be able to bid those documents, you need to design that. And so there's a cost involved for the Northeast Regional Park component. There is the potential project, which is yet to be determined, of about future downtown public restrooms. Part of that, there's 2 pieces to that puzzle. And again, this is part of the strategic plan. The first piece is if the PD were to move forward and relocate, then this building becomes an opportunity for public restrooms off the back side. So you have to do some type of design work that goes into developing how that could work. Don't know what that would cost yet, because we need to get to the point where we can evaluate if we're going to move forward with it. The second piece of that, excuse me, is the pavilion project that could occur at the Village Green. So we have a committee right now that's evaluating if that's going to move forward. They'll make a recommendation to the Park and Rec Board, who ultimately make a recommendation to the Common Council. That project will require some engineering, design, architectural work. So it's not all engineering, there's other components to it. And until we know what the scope of that project could be, it's difficult to do an RFP to get an architect to determine what those costs are. So that's a potential project that could come out of that $30,000. Again, a strategic planning initiative. So I tried to share in the memo, because I think I was hoping it would be helpful to the aldermen, of what it costs to do various things in a park system as you move forward. So I used some examples. One of them was doing a survey. We received a quote. This is a specific line item actually in the budget. I think it was talked about at the committee meeting, to survey a Hidden Ridge Park. That was a park that we recently acquired. It was a homeowners association facility or park, and now we have some work that we need to do there, some tree removal, some prunings, a variety of other things, and we need to get that park actually surveyed so we know where those property lines are. Whether we want to believe it or not, property owners that live adjacent to park facilities start to mow their grass deeper and further, and they start to add amenities to their property, and they're not paying tax on that.
That's not allowed?
Technically, no. Okay. But people are comfortable with it. So we need to reestablish what the property boundary line is, because if there's a tree issue, a hazardous tree, for example, that needs removal, if it's a private tree, it's the homeowner's responsibility. If it's a public tree in a public park, it's our responsibility. So I need to get that surveyed. So that's one example. I don't want to read the whole list, Matt, because everybody has it.
And that's good. I appreciate that explanation. So the examples of recent projects and costs are quotes that may be used, that 30,000, or is that old projects?
No, I gave two examples. One was the Roseland Creek Trail. It has $37,000 there. We did an RFP for engineering and design for that particular trail.
But that's done. We already paid for that, right?
Yeah, but I wanted you to know that we did an RFP process for one project and what the actual cost was for engineering and design, which was an authorization to the council.
Right, and I get that.
I was trying to get you to understand when we do a trail project in the future, which we have many coming forward, that could be that cost.
And John, you do a great job defending your budget. And you do a great job explaining things. So what I'm hearing from you is you want to keep the 30,000 in this engineering fund for potential downtown restroom engineering and potentially Northeast Regional Park work.
Well, and future linear park trail design that we're starting to work on. We need to do the design and cost estimating for that. We have a southwest corner of the city where we have recently acquired property through land dedication that we're looking at a connection piece that will take place down by Concord Road. So I need to start doing the planning and designing for that project. We have Chapman Park design work that can be done. That one will be relatively low cost. Again, the Northeast Regional Park, we're looking at the components of moving forward in the future, so you have to plan and engineer and design that one as well. But we talked a little bit about...
Didn't we earmark funds for that, though? Didn't we earmark funds? We put $300,000 aside, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but that's not that was for the construction of the project, wasn't engineering direct.
That didn't include engineering costs?
Well, it will when we do the RFP for it to get it designed. Let me take a step back. I don't want to confuse people.
Well, no, you are, because, you're
correct.
saying 30,000.
That's why I'm starting over here.
Okay.
So the Northeast Regional Park has a variety of components to it. Right now, the $300,000 that we have is for the grading, engineering of the grading, the path, and landscaping around the perimeter. That's it. But there's additional components that are going to take place there. One of the components we talked about is a future pavilion and restroom facility. Another component, and this isn't finalized yet, we're still working on that. Another component might be a skate park facility. And there's several of them, I'm not gonna list them all. All of those have to have engineering and design work to be done and estimating, and that's what this $30,000 would be for. It's not the first part. So it's for the future. 2020 budgeting, et cetera.
Item 4, and this is for you too. This was something that we actually took a vote on. I think I lost it, but it's the cable TV service for the the community center. We talked about it right before this meeting started.
We did.
That you'd be okay with $300 for maybe an Apple TV and a Chromecast, so people that come in that use the facility that do want to stream a Packer game or something, which again, I think during a wedding, I think the bride would be very irritated to have someone stream a Packer game, but no,
When the Brewers were playing, it was a high demand. So I think if you don't mind, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on it.
Sure.
So the question was valid that Matt asked. So I went back and met with my staff, and we've always offered this service. There was two pieces, and I think this is part of the thought process with the voting from the other officials, is the senior meal site and their ability to have that available to them on a daily basis. So I went back and met with the director of the meal site, asked them how often they are using the cable service, because it was something that they requested when we built the building, and they're not, it's limited. That's the response that they gave us. It's not as often as they did historically. I also went back and met with our team about the use during rentals and events. People say, yeah, it's great, but the reality of it is it's probably being used 5 or 6 times a year. So it begs your question, is it worth paying a monthly cable fee for 15, 20 uses over the calendar year? And the answer is probably no. So in the memo, I identified we could probably get by with a Chromecast Apple type feature that then people could use their personal devices to Chromecast a game or something else through their own providers and save our taxpayers some money. So that's where the 300 would be a maximum spend. I don't think it'd probably be a little bit less.
And a one-time spend.
It's a one-time spend.
Or at least once every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and at that point, if you need to upgrade or if something fails, you're talking about a minor operating piece that you could replace if needed.
Okay. Well,
So yes, we would be comfortable through our operating to make that change.
I'm going to move to amend the budget then again, a second attempt to this, to remove the $1,325 for cable TV service at the community center and replace it with a one-time, I don't know what you want to call it, line item of $300 for a Chromecast or other comparable device.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. This is an amendment to the budget, so anybody want to discuss that amendment? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on an amendment. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Schwartz?
Aye.
Okay, so that's amended. Move on to the next item on your list.
So, Ken used to always say this, and Ken and I got along pretty well, that the budget is a policy device, and I always say that every year because it is part of our policy of what we're going to provide. I don't feel that I probably have a whole lot of support for this, but I continue to wonder why year after year we fund Silver Streak and Senior Center with a lot of the other services like Uber, like Lyft that are out there that people can use at a very reasonable cost, to get from point A to point B. And so far, I think I tried to cut this a couple of years ago and I lost resoundingly. But I want us to consider it in future years of how much this is being actually used versus what's actually out there, like Uber, like Lyft, for people to get a quick ride for, $8, $9, $10 around the city, versus the city taxpayers providing for transportation in a senior center. We do have a community center that I'd love for folks to use, and I don't know if the seniors are using the senior center. My understanding is the senior center is at a private location.
At Berkshire.
Yeah, so we're funding, the senior center at a private location, and I wonder why we can't somehow bring that into the community center in a more viable way where maybe our funding from the city is more, a free rental, free electric, use of the Chromecast we just purchased, stuff like that, versus providing an actual $6,000 check to the senior center. I'm not going to try to amend that tonight, but I'd like us to consider other options for these things and really evaluate what it's used and why some of these things, if Silver Streak is that important to the city, why there's not other funding mechanisms for that. So number 6, if that's okay, Mayor, I don't mind stopping.
No, they
either,
deferred to you to go first.
I'm about halfway through.
They deferred to you to go first, so you keep going.
Okay, I just keep going, okay. And I appreciate that courtesy. The next item is some furniture and other DVD shelving for the library. Betsy, we had some questions on these 2 issues. Betsy, hi. You can come up if you want. And I asked for a little bit more definition on account 340, which is the $6,250 for this kind of small equipment furniture. I still don't feel like this explanation is kind of there yet for
Sure.
me. And I wonder what we're all gonna really use it for. I mean, we still have things like miscellaneous duty supplies and miscellaneous operating supplies, but yet in our budget, we have a variety of other paper and staples and all these other things. So I want more definition about account 340, what that's gonna be actually used for. If you're gonna use the 7 telephones and you need the 7 telephones, I don't mind leaving the 1470 in. So don't talk about the 1470, talk about the rest of the, 3,000, whatever it is, difference.
Sure.
For that.
Happy to, yep.
account. Okay.
All right, thanks for the question. I'm just going to open up my budget book to the right page.
I've memorized my whole budget book. You said I have no idea.
Okay, so you were specifically asking about the part of line 340 that's devoted for small furnishings, equipment, and miscellaneous operating supplies?
Correct.
Okay, so I mentioned in my memo, and I think kind of an abridged version of it made its way to you. I don't know if you received the whole memo that I sent in, but 340 is a line where the library is cut over the years just to try and fit in our bucket. It's a line where there's a lot of expenses, and I have kind of an incomplete list right here, but you can maybe see from that distance, there's a variety of things from power strips to postage stamp labels to replacement power cords, our safe, things like that. So we've got quite a range of things, and unfortunately, when we cut in that line, it doesn't do anything to diminish our need in that line. 340 is really full of things that we need to do our daily business. So even though we've cut over the years, unfortunately, we end up coming in over budget in that line, even if we've cut, just because in order to keep doing our business, we need to keep purchasing supplies there.
And so that goes back to my original question, which is I still don't feel like I have a great explanation for what's really going in there, because we've got this 6250 in the budget. There's a little bit more explanation in the memo response to my questions. But I'm still looking at all these other areas above where you have, printing, postage, you have office supplies. You have another 2,000 above in line 310 for office supplies. So are you telling me that these things are not included in electronic media, office supplies, membership dues, janitorial supplies, safety supplies, computer accessories, paint and air filters, light bulbs? You've got other lines where all this stuff seems to kind of fit, but yet we have this kind of extra $6,000 sitting out there. And again, I don't mind. You highlighted specifically the 7 new telephones, which is, I guess, okay. 1470. What I need is an explanation for the other 600.
Sure.
And I don't feel like, I just don't think that we have enough explanation to just put that in.
Sure. So the city finance department, we love them, and they really do a great job of making sure that we know whenever there's an expense exactly what line it goes into. So it's real specific as far as which expenses need to go to 340 and which can go into some of the other budget lines that you mentioned. It gets pretty detailed, and so you can rest assured that anything that's in there belongs in 340 and wouldn't be appropriate in any other budget line.
If you want to reduce the cost on
Yeah.
that, Matt, you're welcome to.
Yeah,
to-
I think what I'd like to do, because I acknowledge that there's probably some stuff in there, it just doesn't seem like I have enough explanation for my purposes. I'd like to reduce that by $2,500, so I'll move to amend account 340 and reduce that by $2,500.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I had one comment.
Go ahead.
So as she was saying, we do make her sort out between different categories
Right.
for her different types of supplies. I would say that operating supplies is more over her program supplies than office supplies or cataloging or, all those kind of things that they do. It's more program supplies. So when she's going to have children's thing come over, she needs to go buy some extra colored paper and markers and those kind of things. They're not office supplies, they're program or daily operating supplies. So, there is a bucket for many different kinds of supplies. I can't speak to the dollar amount she has there, but I just wanted to let you know why there are so many different kinds of line items and what they're used for.
I would clarify as well, just to, there's also the programming budget line as well. So if we have expenses that we need for programs, it's true that some of these incidentally are used for programs, like maybe we need a flashlight for something, or we use the paper cutter to prepare for a program, things like that. We also have the separate programming budget, just to.
Yeah, and I guess what she's mostly saying is operating supplies to her is daily daily things.
Right.
Daily things that come up that she needs to spend money on that don't fit into the other supply buckets.
Okay. Alderman Shaw?
Yeah, the question I have on this account then, in account 340, does it normally run a deficit?
Do you mean, does it normally run a deficit is that we have more expenses than we have in the line?
Correct.
Yes, correct. So we typically, even if we have let's say we have, a certain amount of money budgeted in that line, if we have the 6250, if our paper cutter breaks, we just replaced a paper tape dispenser today. We bought it in 1992, so we're really frugal, but if it breaks, we just need to replace it. So sure, so if we've cut it before to fit in our bucket, then we have still gone over in that line.
But this account is normally a deficit one that you make up for somewhere else.
Correct, right, yep. You're welcome, thank you for the question.
You have something, Tom?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
No, Tom, you were first.
I'm first?
Go ahead.
It's really close.
Okay. As far as, her supplies and things like that, I was first handed Tuesday, or Monday. What was it today? Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday. At Shorehaven yesterday, for instance. They had a kid, they have their kids program. It's usually every Tuesday, but today, because you have all the voters over there, the young lady who's just phenomenal on doing that program comes in with a big bucket of all kinds of stuff that they needed. Pens, markers, you name it. I had to help her carry this bucket in. And I've been to these things before. For 2 to 5 years old. It's a wonderful program. And I had to make about 20 turkeys because it was Thanksgiving thing. So I put my name on it, Tom Turkey. So that was a good thing. So I can't support it, cutting any more of that budget out. So.
Lou?
So help me understand, if I were to support the $2,500 reduction, what kind of programs could potentially be impacted? Library being a quality of life type service that the city provides, who would be impacted? Is it the kids? Is it the seniors? If that account currently runs in a deficit and you're able to find dollars to support that deficit elsewhere within the budget, are you just going to be able to find $2,500 someplace else in the budget to kind of make that up along with whatever else? Or are we going to have to see reduced programming and support services because that money's gone?
When you, just as a point of clarification, when you say programs, do you mean things like story time and outreach services and things like that? Or do you mean more of a program of service where we do things like offering, XYZ things for circulation, things like that? Or kind of all of the
Whatever arbitrary program funds may be in that catch bucket.
Sure.
That was discussed.
So you're asking if you cut by 2,500, would we be able to make up for it elsewhere, or would it result in a reduction in our programs? I think it would be the latter. I think we'd have to start looking at kind of paring back on some things. I mean, we try as much as we can we're so frugal there. We reuse, we ask for recycled goods from our staff to offer junk programs so we can keep our programming costs low. So unfortunately, I mean, we've tried and puzzling through this throughout, since we last talked about the budget. We really tried to submit something to you that is as close to the bone as possible. So honestly, I'm not sure how we would do with the reduction of $2,500. It's not a huge amount of money. I mean, it's $2,500, but to us, it really is. But thank you for the question.
Any more comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to reduce the account 340 by $2,500. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski?
Nay.
Alderman Miller?
Nay.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Nay.
Alderman Ellis?
Nay.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Nay.
Alderman Zwart?
Nay.
Well, that was a resounding defeat.
Next.
I'm okay with 7-1. I do have a few more questions out of this, and hopefully can go a little quicker. If you go to your budget book, A162, and this is my fault for not asking this before, it's something that I found later on. We've got and I think probably the recreational center, the community center has kind of spiked my interest in things where I see internet and cable. And that cost from 2017 actuals $1,800, that's gone up to $3,240 for the proposed 2019. So again, here, do we have internet and cable, or what are we doing there?
Matt, could you repeat what page you're on, please?
Yeah, well, you can look at A162 is the line item in the expenditure budget summary. A164 is the actual kind of breakout. So I'm just trying to figure out, and I think in there is this teach line as well.
Right.
So if that is different than anything else, I guess I'm curious what the teach line is then, maybe.
Sure.
That's the better question.
Yep, let me get that page up here.
164.
Thank you.
Real quick, that's also where that $600.
Right. Oh, that's true,
Right.
which is out right now, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So our teach line, we have $1,200 a year for that. That's our internet service. And then we also have an additional data line through Spectrum. Spectrum, the current Spectrum charge, or Spectrum, thank you. And that is an additional internet line. So as you know, we have our wired internet service, and we also have our Wi-Fi within the building. And we have, it's been actually nice to have both in case one line goes down or the other line goes down. We have a backup. But we use both since we have quite a bit of data usage at the library every day.
Is there a way, I mean, it seems odd to me that we would have two separate internet service providers for one building. I mean, I think, I'm not going to cut that this year, but it seems to me, you know, for community center, we have one, you know, internet bill, you know, and a Wi-Fi, you know, just like I have in my house. I have one hard line coming in, and I've got a Wi-Fi router that, you know, nests throughout the entire house. So I think that's an area that we should seriously look at of what we do to try to get one provider.
Yep.
You know, maybe combined it's less. You know, maybe it goes up to 2,000, but combined it's a little less. So
if I can clarify just a tiny bit there.
Is there something
I can just, it's always a good idea in a public building, something that's used like that, to have two separate providers. In case one provider does have an issue, then you still have an issue. Do you still have the internet up? A lot of public buildings do that.
Okay, yeah, I get that for like...
That's used by the community.
Right, I get that for like a police station or an ambulance service, but you know, if the library internet goes down for an hour, what are we facing? We're facing with people that can't get on Wi-Fi for an hour? I mean, I guess you know, so you're saying it's hard to make up the 2,500 I wanted to cut, but, you know, is that an area that we could maybe look at possibly doing something with in the future? That's all my comment is.
Just as a point of clarification, the teach line is a line through the state where we get a kind of a good deal on internet. So that's where the teach line comes in, and then like Mayor said, we have the separate line for Spectrum. But you're right, it is something we always look at. Do we need both? Do we not? Last Thursday, it actually came in handy because the teach line, our Badger line went down, but we were still able to use our Charter, our Spectrum line. So it was nice to have both. That's how we connect to our library system. So if our internet goes down, we can't check things out to people in the library or use any of our online services or ILS, things like that. So, but I hear what you're saying. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on as time goes by.
Electronic media, this is page A162, and then obviously the breakouts on 164. That's a 221% increase.
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out what else is in that, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of explanation as to what that increase is for.
And that was line 324. Did you say, Matt, or 325?
I'm sorry, it's 325?
Yes. So line 325 was a substantial change just because we moved expenses from line 210, which is outside services, non-IT. We shifted some expenses from that line to both line 325 and 324. The expenses there are pretty steady. In fact, some of them went down. It's just a matter of kind of accounting for them where they make more sense.
And the last big question I have for you is the DVD shelving.
Yes.
Right now, still's in there, 6,000. Since we had the budget cycle, and there were a lot of questions about it, have you looked at actually getting a real estimate for what you need for that, or evaluating whether we can do something different with, instead of like brand new shelving, you know?
Yes.
I don't know, go to like an old Blockbuster and see if they got some old shelving. So
like I
there's
mentioned,
gotta be a couple that are around somewhere.
There's still one around.
Actually.
Alderwoman
Spiegelberg and I were emailing about that today, like, you know, maybe there's some used option, things like that. We're always open to looking at that. What we did so far is we looked at a couple of vendors. Demco is a common library vendor for the heavy-duty kind of commercial-grade stuff that we need. There's a number at the library store. There's a number of other vendors. So we're looking at something that is going to be sturdy. We buy it once. It lasts for decades and decades to come, so I'm not coming next, you know, very soon talking to you about this again. So, but yeah, Matt, like you say, we're always wanting to look for lower cost options. So far what we have is something that we could probably afford 3 with the $6,000 we have budgeted. And that would go a ways to alleviate our space problem with our DVD collection. Alderman Spiegelberg also asked a question about, are you making sure you're not having a lot of stuff on the DVD shelves that doesn't need to be there, that isn't earning its keep? And that was a great question. And we have a kind of a strict weeding regimen with our DVD collection. You have to really earn your keep to be on our DVD shelves because it is such a high cert collection. So anyway, Matt, to answer your question, yeah, we're trying to find something that will fit the bill and fit our needs, that will last, but that also is not too expensive.
Do you see the use of DVDs going up in the future?
I do. Actually, our circulation overall in every category of patron residential category is up 5% year to date, and it was up the year before that too. So our circulation continues to rise, and it's kind of surprising, you think, with all the streaming and things like that, but our DVD use continues to be very, very high.
And you see that as a going trend moving forward? I mean, I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because with the streaming service and everything that's out there, even Redbox, I mean, you can get a DVD, but you can also sign up for their streaming service for brand new movies. I mean, do we see the DVDs being a big deal for 10 years out still?
Exactly. That's a great question. I mean, it's something we continue to look at. Obviously, it feels like the future is happening faster and faster, as the years go by. But so far, our trends seem to show that DVD use continues to be very popular. But we'll see. We'll continue to evaluate it.
Okay.
That's it?
Well, yeah.
My brother probably gives you 300 DVDs already, classical stuff. Yeah.
Your who? What was that?
My brother.
Your brother.
It does.
Do you want to defer for a while? Give him a case.
I'll take a break.
Okay.
Real quick question.
Lou had his hand up first.
As regards to how technology is impacting your services, and the DVD is a hard copy.
Right.
You can convert that to a digital media, like with a Vudu type service, and then that becomes available on the internet. So I would think that like a Redbox or something like that, that's more of your newer release type materials, but I would think a lot of your DVD rental is historical past movies. Is there a conversion that could happen with that would still make those historical titles available to the public through those types of services, or do you have to have that hard copy in order to do that?
Right. That's a great question. It's a little dicey with copyright law.
I was going to say copyright laws.
We like to, avoid getting anywhere close to breaking the law, which you'll be happy to know. But it's an interesting question because there's a number of services out there, one of which you might have heard of, it's called Kanopy with a K. And Kanopy is a service that some libraries, I think mostly in larger cities with larger budgets, have, and that is sort of an online movie checkout service. It's kind of like ebooks, but it's a movie. It's really, really great, but there are some limitations with it. Number one, for our library system being cost, but other limitations are that a library card holder would only be able to check out, a certain number, a handful of movies a month, and that's a little bit tricky. But we do continue to look at those as new products come on the market, just to continue to make sure we're serving the needs of people that want to go with the digital copies and want to go with the hard copies as well. Okay. We do have a DVD collection of historical things and educational things, and we also try and have a really high circulating popular collection as well.
Kevin.
You had mentioned something, the future is happening, and it's happening quickly. However, with that stated, I can honestly say there's been 2 occasions when my wife has come in because we've wanted to see something like Footloose, okay?
Yeah.
It's an old movie.
It's an old movie. Oh. It's before your time. Anyway.
High school's doing it, isn't it?
Kevin Bacon, or is that?
You got it.
That is Bacon one. And it's not on cable. It's not on the internet, right. And we need to go ahead and get that. So it's a service. It's a very valuable service. I have a question in reference to the Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In reference to the letter that was received, can you?
Talking to the mic, Kevin.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Can you give me a little more information on why it's so imperative that you have the Wi-Fi when you do have the internet?
Sure. Do you mean the hotspots, Alderman Ellis?
I'm sorry, yes.
The hotspots
I'm
particularly?
sorry, yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, so I know that Lori sent you my memo about the hotspots, just offering a little bit more information about what they can be used for. Are you wanting me to go and talk about some of those reasons?
That is correct.
Okay, sure. So one of the things that you mentioned, Alderman Ellis, was that we offer Wi-Fi in the library, so why would you need to check Wi-Fi out to people? That's a great question. One of the reasons is that the library is only open a certain number of hours a week. We'd love to be open 24/7 if we ever want to go there, but we're not there right now, of course. And so, unfortunately, people's need for the internet outstrips the library's open hours. So it's nice if people can be, how people's work schedules, people are working from home a lot, or there's students that are doing homework late into the night as much as we wish they would just go to bed. So unfortunately, people need to use the internet when the library is not open. Another limitation there is if, I mentioned in my memo that every student in grades 4 through 12 gets a Chromebook with the public schools. And as I mentioned in my memo, 15.5% of our students qualify as economically disadvantaged. So it's reasonable to suppose that many of those families wouldn't be able to afford home internet service. Well, then they can come to the library, except if that parent is working second shift or working 2 jobs, and it's hard to transport the child after school, get them to the library, have them use the internet there, and get them home at a reasonable hour. It's a hard thing. So that's another reason why it's important for us to offer the hotspots in addition to Wi-Fi in the library. Does that answer your question?
So if I hear you right, it's a public service.
It's a public service to us. It's an economical way to expand service to things we're already paying for, like our Overdrive and Flipster, Gale courses, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
All right.
So if that was something you wanted to put back in, you could make it a motion to amend the.
As a matter of fact, I am going to do that. I'd like to make that a motion to put that $600 back into the budget. Where the library, once again, is there for public service, and there are a lot of individuals that cannot, in some way, shape, or form, afford what maybe some others can. And by knowing that there's a service out there that can provide them the ability to get on the internet when they need to, or to look up certain things when maybe the library is not open at that time, whatever the case is a service. Remember that, the library is a service, okay? So
if you're making a motion, just make the motion.
I'm going to make a motion that we do put that $600 back into the budget.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. Go ahead, Derek.
What they're saying is, or what the justification is that kids need to use this to do their homework. And my feeling is if the schools are giving them homework to do and they need the internet, then the schools should be providing that internet service to take home, not the city. So that's, I'm gonna vote no.
That's fine. Karen?
Betsy and I were emailing a little bit today. They only have 5 hotspots. Other libraries and other communities our size are going like they've got 15 or 20. However, I had a thought process with Betsy, and she got back to me, but then I did a little bit more research. I did a quick Google. Some community library in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, actually charges for their hotspots. There's a potential for this to have revenue to pay back this expense. They charge $40 a month. Obviously, that sounds a little high. Somebody can check out the hotspot for $40 a month and keep it for the entire month. Even if there's some nominal fee that is charged that would still be affordable to these families, but it would cover that cost, I think that's worth checking into.
I actually think that's a great idea. A 40 seems high, but let people check it out for 5. With 5 of them, my understanding is they're checked out. I'm on the library board that they're constantly checked out. They're not constantly checked out by students. We actually don't probably know who they're all checked out by exactly. But if you charged $5 for a week of the hotspot, so some student really does need it, right? And they pay $5, you'd make up that 600 plus, have an income and provide a very cheap internet, high-speed internet service for people that truly need it. That's what should be considered, not giving this. First of all, I think we have a 16-year minimum. Can I
don't know if that goes to the amendment.
Sure, this goes directly to whether or not we should approve adding it back in.
So I'm not sure if that.
Oh, no, well, that's fine. I won't talk about that.
I know the point you're making, but I don't know if the cost, that can always be worked out.
Yeah, I think that's something that actually should be considered in lieu of just doing the 600 straight out of the tax levy. But let me talk to the amendment to add it back in and why this is wrong. First of all, the memo we were given has a variety of interesting positions in here. First of all, 4th to 12th graders can't use the Wi-Fi hotspots. You have to be 16 years old or higher to rent them, correct?
Right, you need to be 16 years old or to check it out on your own library card. However, if your parent consents to let you use their library card, you can check it out.
If they were going to come in. But a 4th grader can't just wander into the library and get a Wi-Fi hotspot.
With their own library card, no, but with their parents' library card, yes.
So some of these other issues, so some citizens have only intermittent need for internet service, so they cannot justify the cost for a home plan. Almost all of the things you put into this memo, and I don't want to sound callous, but why is that a city job to provide internet service because someone is in a bad internet area or someone can't afford internet this month because they bought a very expensive laptop? I just find this very strange. The other thing you put in here is the 36% of the time we're only open. We're open 9 to 8 Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 Friday through Saturday, and 1 to 4 through Sunday. Out of that time, out of the percentage of time that you put, there's 168 hours in a week that people could use the internet. That's true, but a lot of people sleep at night.
They do?
And, or, if they're working third shift, they sleep during the day. So they're not using the internet for, 7, 8 hours a day. So that's another 56 hours out of there. So, we're presented with this kind of memo that's telling us, well, we really need to help these folks. And I'm not opposed to helping people. I think if we want to rent it out, that's a great idea. But this is not a library service. I just don't think this is a library service. And again, this is part of our policy. I mean, how much more do we expand? And like Karen said, is 5 enough? 15%, if 15% of the kids are truly in disadvantaged families, how many kids are in the OAS school district? I don't know, 1,500?
I've got that.
2,000?
School district?
Yeah.
There's 1,500 in a high school.
Yeah, at least.
Okay, so the five Wi-Fis that we're providing at taxpayer expense isn't going to even make a scratch at all on that. And I agree with Derek's point. If the school district's giving kids Chromebooks and saying you have to complete your homework on the internet, that's a school district issue, which is a much, much larger taxing district than our city. I would encourage the rest of the aldermen to vote against this. I hope that the library board will not put it just back in like they did in the last budget cycle, but I anticipate that is going to happen. So I think we need to make a point that, look, they're spending taxpayer money. That doesn't mean we should provide internet service to people all around the city.
Kevin, you had another comment?
I did.
Well, Kevin had his hand up first.
I had mine up 15 minutes ago.
No,
Go ahead
let
then.
him go.
No, go ahead.
No, please,
It hurts.
please.
First of all, the library is closed on Sundays, correct?
No.
During the
The
summer?
library is closed on Sundays from May through September.
Right, so that cuts the hours down. When we start talking about hotspots, I'm looking at hotspots as the fact that that was places I used to go to years ago because I had no idea what you were talking about. So I had to ask my son, and I got the explanation. But I'm still in favor of taking care of your needs over at the library, because to me it's very important to give you anything that you possibly need over, because there's a good revenue for the city, and maybe we'll get more kids off the street to get in there and do business.
Kevin?
And that's my point. When you're talking about those individuals that can't afford, in some shape or form, the ability to acquire the internet that they need, and they're relying on the city and they're relying on the school to be able to get it, by charging them $5 or $10 or $50, that's slapping them in the face. They can't afford it as it is. So you're looking at it in a business way, and I'm looking at it in more of a realistic way, okay? I believe that as alderman, as I'm here to serve the public. I'm here in a position that if I can give some sort of a benefit that is going to benefit the public as whole, that I should do so. And looking at something as small as this, it's only $600. Something as small as this, that's going to go ahead and benefit the whole community. I believe that we need to say, yes, we need to do this.
Okay. Lou?
Is there a way to support putting that $600 back in if we were to see a revenue line associated with that service. I really think if you invest that $600, and it is a public policy, so if we as a city and through our departments look at ways to provide these types of services, and as part of that policy that the library can provide, or if it's Park and Rec, and say if they qualify through our policy based on their income level or whatever that policy is, you can get it for free. If you don't, then it's $5 a week or whatever that is to help offset that cost, not only to cover that $600, but potentially to expand that program based on demand. I think from a public policy standpoint, I'd like to see that, because I agree with you. There are some people that just can't afford it. And it's not, we're focusing on kids, but it's not just kids. It's seniors, and it's the population as a whole. Because we have a pretty wide variety within our population. So as a public policy standpoint, if we can find ways to support with revenue those services to those who can afford it, I think that's fair and just for our public, and have a net there for those who can't afford it to just make it part of the normal rental process.
Is this an appropriate time to ask a question? Or?
Well, I was just going to bring up, I mean, I think that the amendment that's out there is to put the 600 back in there for it. That's the budget thing. Then there would be a second amendment. I'm not sure if it's part of the budgeting process or if it would be just a direction to say, okay, now the library board has to set policy to say, how do you set up a revenue stream for specific, I mean, and that's something the library board would have to determine, because that would then be a revenue stream coming in to offset the cost. Some people would get charged for it, some people wouldn't. That's, you know, how do you determine poverty level, or can't afford it, or, you know, somebody might say they can't afford it even though they're driving a Lexus. I don't know.
Well, there are ways that we aren't going to talk about now, but as public policy, and the reason I think this is good discussion is because it's not just this service. Yeah. And it's not just your department. There are multiple services that we provide through multiple departments that this would apply to as public policy.
Well, we're getting off the amendment now.
So
that's what I'm saying is we have
I support that if we can adjust
we can't
consider
say that
somehow.
That's something we'd have to talk about at a different time. But what I just said before. Any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to restore the $600 for the Wi-Fi hotspots. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Nay.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Was that nay?
Nay.
I'm sorry. Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Nay.
Alderman Zwart?
Nay.
4-4, yes.
I'll vote aye. We'll restore it. And then we will work out the policy on how it gets charged.
At a separate time?
Well, that's something that we'll have to, Sarah can bring it up with put on the agenda for the library board to determine.
We don't control the library board agenda.
Right. But I think Betsy could include a future agenda item on the library board to explain the sentiments of the council, and then they can discuss that policy directive at a future library board meeting.
And the reason I voted aye on this is because I agree with Alderman Ellis. This is a public service. This is a quality of life issue, and this is something that a city being a city, this is what we do.
Thank you. May I make one comment? Just I want to mention, since they made the trouble to come out here, I do have a couple library board members, and I thought you'd like to know who they were, since they serve the city too. So we have Melissa Kranz on the library board. You can wave. Orland Fote is our library board vice president, and this is Sheila Homburg, who you met before, who's on the library board. Oh, and there's Lisa Bedoin, owner of Books and Company, and also on the library board secretary. Yes.
Okay, do we have did you have anything else? Did anybody else have any amendments or any discussion they wanted to have on the budget? Did you have more things, Matt?
I do have more things.
Okay, does anybody else have anything? Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I want to walk through the rest of these points, and I think there's things we have to still discuss. I still have a lot of heartache with the budget as a whole, notwithstanding what we just did. Number 7 on my request was the further explanation for the narcotics analyzer. Chief, my understanding is there's only going to be one of these, right? Who's going to have the only one analyzer in the city? Is that going to be kept at the station, or?
That'll be kept at the station. It can be used in the field or at the PD.
And I'm sure after tonight, there's going to be a lot of discussion about Rozak trying to cut Wi-Fi for poor people and the narcotics analyzer. And I, frankly, I don't care, because I think this budget has a lot of very strange issues in it, and I just can't get over some of these. This one is one that sticks out to me. We don't do any testing, right? If we get a narcotic, we don't test it here, do we?
Yes, we do. We currently use what's called a wet test.
Okay.
The officer is required to open the packaging, remove some of the particle, put it inside this bag, break the ampules in a certain order to get a drug result based on the color on the bag. On some drugs, you have to do 2 or 3 tests to reach that level.
So if we're using are we going to use the narcotic analyzer every time we get a narcotic then?
Yes.
Okay. So if there's someone pulled over on the side of the road and somebody's got a baggie of some white substance underneath their seat, they're going to call in whoever to bring in the narcotics analyzer, or they're going to transport it here and have it analyzed before you test it, right?
If I can back up.
Yeah.
Currently with the current opioid epidemic, the current standard is our officers are equipped with rubber gloves, masks, and glasses. The latest expectation out there is that soon officers are going to have to gown up when they come in contact with any powder whatsoever. So our goal is officer safety with this analyzer. So officers don't have to open the packaging to test it. It tests through plastic or glass to identify what the item is inside the packaging.
So functionally, if you use the analyzer, you don't, and let's say it's fentanyl or whatever it is, then do you open the package and still have to do the chemical test?
No.
Okay, so where does that, is there a result from the chemical analyzer that goes with that packet then to the state crime lab?
It would go to the crime lab eventually, but the results of that test would go to the DA's office for charging purposes.
Okay, so part of the test will include some type of digital printout or
Correct.
Something, okay. Do you know how many departments out there actually have this type of machine, and what's the lifespan of this thing?
The one that comes to mind that I'm aware of is Waukesha. Okay. And the lifespan, I don't know.
What do we do now? I mean, do we gown up now to test this stuff?
We currently don't gown. We go to the level of the gloves, the masks, and the glasses. That's the level we go to now. To test it back in the not in the evidence room, in our evidence processing area. Part of the problem is, we have the exposure when we're first on the street. We have the contact when we get in the vehicle. Recently we had the officers from the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department that overdosed on fentanyl when they were exposed to it in the vehicle. The other part of that is when you bring it back to the police department, and you have to take it out of the packaging to test it. The way our police department is currently set up, it's right in our officer work area where everyone works, so there'd be exposure to everyone else in that work area.
So right now, if we buy the tester will only be used, and then that's it. It gets packaged up with the results,
Correct.
and you don't touch it again.
Correct.
Okay, that's a little bit better explanation, I think, than last time. My final question on it is, are there times where the test doesn't work? So if it's in a certain type of canister or like a metal container, this thing doesn't work still,
Correct.
right?
Then we'd have to open it.
Okay.
But we're, at least by using the tester whenever we can, we're minimizing the exposure to it.
Go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry, that, yeah.
Lou had a question first.
If you weren't able to get a result from that, that piece of equipment, would you take extreme caution in trying to figure out what it is, or would you, some kind of, a different policy then kicks in? Because I would imagine if you can't determine what it is, it could be some bad stuff, which is why you have this in the budget.
Well, the analyzer tests approximately 450 different substances. If we would not get a test result, we'd have to send it into the crime lab. So basically that person would not be charged at that time. We'd send it into the crime lab, and once we got the results of the test, the person would be charged.
But you wouldn't open it. Our department would not open that. It would go someplace else to be analyzed.
We would open it to test it. I mean, we'd gown up and everything else to test it if we couldn't have access to it. I mean, we're just trying to minimize by having a tester to use it as much as
And
possible.
that tester allows you to make a charging decision, or at least something right away, immediately?
Correct.
Okay.
You're talking basically a high percentage of the cases would be resolved right there.
Correct. I mean, our typical
Be 100%
experiences,
yeah.
you know, it's in baggies, it's in, you know, corner tabs of bags. That's where our experience
That's
is.
where it is, yeah. Good.
Just think this is a very important safety item for the staff and should stay in the budget.
I agree.
Steve, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. The next one is, was item 8 on my request for budget clarification.
Okay.
This was the drug intervention, well, in here, I don't know, maybe this is the way I wrote it, drug intervention funds. Maybe
Okay.
it's interdiction, I think.
Interdiction, intervention, and education.
And the one thing is, we didn't use the money last year, which was gonna be for community outreach, and now we're gonna potentially purchase a drone. One of the reasons you gave at the last budget meeting and in this memo was potential grow operations discovered. So my questions for you are a couple. One, how many reports do we have of grow operations in the city? I mean, is this like an every month occurrence? Is this like a once a year kind of deal?
Well, if I can back up, first of all, it was in the 2018 budget, which we're still in that budget cycle.
Right.
And actually, we have identified, over the course of time, we've been educating ourselves on drones, and we've identified the drone that's been ordered. As far as the grows go, typically grows are identified in late summer going into fall, and they're in more of the rural, overgrown areas within the city. The problem we have is access to those areas. You know, it's hard for us if we're told, this is an example, there's a grow back behind wastewater, which is a popular area. We can't get in there to find it because obviously they're not going to have it on the trail. They're not going to have it on one of the paths that go into the woods back there or into the overgrowth. So with the drone, we'd have the ability to get eyes up in the sky and identify the grows.
So back to my original question, which was how many reports of grow operations do we get in a year? Dozens?
I would say a dozen.
In a year?
Correct.
And how many are actual grow operations that we discover they're grow operations?
We can't get in to find them.
What's that?
We can't get in to find them on foot because they're back in the overgrown areas.
Well, but here's my issue with the drone, I guess, in general. If someone's planting marijuana, they obviously have to get back there to plant it, but now we can't get back there to just check it out within the city limits?
Well, I guess
something doesn't connect there for me in my head.
Well, I guess if you look at how many acres of land we have back behind wastewater, how much time are we going to spend looking for a grow operation by having officers back there on foot when we typically have, 3 to 4 officers working the street? It's about priorities.
Well, but if you have somebody back there operating a drone, you're using an officer resource anyway. Here's my issue with that line from 2018 is we didn't use it. What did we spend on the drone? Did we just, you said we purchased it, we identified one, what's the cost?
$4,100, that's just for the drone with the camera. And we'll be looking at some additional battery packs. And if we can back up, the drone's gonna cover a lot more area when we're looking for grow operations than just an officer or 2 on foot trying to cover an area.
And what are we doing for the 2019 budget? Now that's what we're really talking about in more detail,
Correct.
Which is the 2019 now, which is now back to the community outreach thing. Are we still discussing doing drug kits for people, free drug kits, or are we
Correct.
still on that?
Our focus for 2019 is going to be the teens and parent education. What we want to start is there's a drug test kit program out there called Test My Teen, which allows parents to have 1 free drug test kit based on a certificate they get from the police department. That would be our starting point for the program. With that, we'd provide parents with some educational information and resource information. Then we would do moving forward with those parents, once we identify them, we would make the drug kits available at a reduced cost to them. We looked at a number of different possible programs with the community outreach. We looked at the DARE program as a possibility, training an officer for the DARE program. I don't have the resources to have a day shift officer go to day training and then go to different schools as much as I'd like to do that. We also looked at another program where a police officer is involved. Somebody comes into your lobby, says, I'm addicted to drugs. The police officer then takes care of that person, finds them a rehab facility, gets them in a rehab, drives them to the facility. And the third program, and that's unreasonable because we don't have resources for that. And the third program we looked at is similar to that, except the police officer works with Badger Care or different insurance companies to get them insurance coverage. And if they can't find them insurance coverage, the police department pays for them, their rehab, which obviously we can't do that.
Well, I expressed before I was against providing free drug kits, just like I'm against providing free Wi-Fi and a variety of other things that we're considering services to the community. So I'm going to move to strike the 2019 budget for $5,000 for this. I think we were told last cycle that that's what this was for. And like a lot of these budget items, once they get in, it's not just $600 for Wi-Fi for 1 year, it's $600 for Wi-Fi for 20 years. It's $5,000 in drug test kits for people for 20 years. And that's how you have to look at budgets. It's not just that 1 year number. So I'm going to move to strike that $5,000 from the 2019 budget. Acknowledging we gave you $5,000 last year for that, and it was used for a drone. So,
Yes. So we have a motion, do we have a second? No second, so the motion dies. Lou, you had a point?
With the drone, that drone is going to be used for more than just grow operations. And I believe, you know, we've had a lot of discussion about drones. Drones provide our city and our police department greater response time and greater ability to cover more area in a shorter period of time to respond to lost children, active assailant situations potentially. Eyes in the sky are used to be something kind of exclusive to big cities with helicopters and all kinds of fun stuff. These drones are giving our community that kind of capability with the different attachments that you can procure for those drones to provide us with a greater level of security that goes to your mission and public safety, and it also impacts, in my opinion, public health, because if you can provide our community with deterrence associated with drug use, whether it's the first threat of from a parent to a child that, look, I'll take you in the cop shop, and we'll test you right now. I'll tell you, I've at the same time, it's available at Walgreens. I've purchased one as a deterrent for my kids. I'll take them into the cop shop as well. Drugs to me are, and the epidemic that we're in, and the tendency for our youth to engage in that, any tool that we can provide as a city to reduce that, I think is something that we should always do. And you know, you get something as tragic as that huffing incident up in Eau Claire. It doesn't take somebody multiple times to impact somebody's life. It's at one time, and any deterrent we can provide and the parent can provide, it's definitely not just a city obligation. It is from a policy standpoint. Hopefully, parents know that we have this as a priority and that those tools are available. They'll take that seriously.
Kevin? I'm good. You're good? Okay. Matt, do you have anything else?
On the memo, I want to defer number 9 and 10 for later discussion. We kind of beat this to death on the Rooker-Melke expenses. I mean, that's $1 million. That's almost 10% of our budget. We need to do something, seriously look at city engineering and what we're doing with those monies. We also looked at number 10 is the 1099 information for our permit, and how much we're recovering in permit fees, how much we're paying out to a private group to come in is a massive number. And I can't imagine that there are essentially 4 full-time inspectors working for our current outside inspector group. I mean, I think you could get somebody in here for 75, 80 grand a year to do full-time inspections, and we could either pocket the rest of that money and send it into general fund, or actually reduce permit fees for our residents. But instead, for the last 10 plus years, we just continue to funnel in $500,000 and funnel it back out to an outside inspection service, and we really do need to look at that. I don't think there's any change we can make now to that in the budget. One of the other questions I had was, and it's a little unclear, Lori, this is the one I was talking about, I think it's item 11, which is talking about how much we've budgeted for every year and how much we then put back into the general fund. And I think what you gave me seemed a little confusing because we had some other settlement expenses in last year's budget. But in a normal budget year, how much out of the budget are we putting into general funds year to year? You know, that we don't
Last
spend.
page.
Is it the last page? Okay.
Last page of the memo, the very last item.
Okay.
There's your fund balance change.
Okay.
So that's the revenues and expenses. So revenues, you know, sometimes we come in higher or lower on revenues or expenses. So there's that net amount every year for the past 5 years.
So the way I read this then is in 2013, we over budgeted by 645,000. 2014 under budgeted, so we lost money by 117. 15 was 338, on and on, you know, and 17 was actually because of settlements and other things, we actually expended money out of general fund.
Yeah, and actually, and it's not just because of settlements and stuff. And we had a planned spend down for the general fund reserve. So that was, we actually planned on that number being $1.2 million, okay? That we sent to capital. But because other revenues and expenses, the thing with the budget is, this is our best estimate at this time. So if all of a sudden, and what happened this year, interest rates got better. We didn't expect that when we planned the budget, you know, a year before that. So there's unexpected things that happen. You know, sometimes a position comes vacant and it stays vacant for 6 months. You know, sometimes, like last year, we had a reconciliation of our street lights and took a credit back on that for, actually it was 3 years of expenses, but it all showed up in last year's budget. So, I mean, there's things that happen, both over budget and under budget, because as much work as we put into these, it's still our best estimate of what these costs are gonna be today. Next year at this time, you know, that's where it comes in, what the actual is. We do a good job, I think, of estimating, but there are outstanding, you know, circumstances that happen. And those aren't things that, and I mean, we budget for contingency for that very same reason.
I appreciate that. And 13 was, there was a discussion, I've been on this warpath for about 4 years on part-time employees with benefits. And it still looks like we have 118,000 budgeted for this. 6 are with the library, 2 with dispatch, building maintenance. Mayor, I'm okay with you being part-time with benefits.
Mayor's a part-time employee.
Yeah, that's okay.
And like I wrote in the memo, you know, 9 positions are grandfathered in. So that means they worked here at a part-time level when the state said that you only needed to work 600 hours a year to be eligible for WRS. Now that's changed now.
Make sure you're talking to the mic.
I'm sorry. No one wants to listen to my voice today anyway. That's changed over the last, I think it went to 1,200, now it's 1,400 hours. So, but if you ever, when we hire someone, if they ever worked for a WRS employer, so if somebody comes in from a different city or, you know, something else, they could already be grandfathered into that. Any new employees that we get that have never been in the system before, the part-time basis is always under that number of hours. Currently, we have 9 positions that have worked here long enough to have been grandfathered into the old 600-hour rule.
But there's still 10 that are not grandfathered in though, right? Are the 9 out of the 10, I guess that first bullet point, it's confusing. So 9 out of the 10 are grandfathered in?
Yeah.
Or are there 19 total with part-time with benefits?
No, there's 10 positions that are classified part-time with benefits. 9 of them are grandfathered in, the other one's the mayor.
Okay. I mean, that makes more sense. You know, obviously the benefit payment associated with part-time folks is in this budget $26,000. So
Right.
it's something that we need to continue to address, I think,
Right.
moving forward.
And then when you look at the benefit portion too, those benefits are prorated based on the number of hours that they worked at work as well. So part-time employees are never benefited more than 50%. I mean, if they work 50% hours, that would be the highest amount that they would get a benefit.
Yep. That's all I have for now, Mayor.
And Matt, just as a comment, you're an alderman all the time, right? You're an alderman every day, all day?
No,
No? So you go home at night, you're not an alderman?
I'm not.
No? Okay.
Why? What does that get at?
Because you're always, an elected official is always an elected official. Doesn't matter if you work part-time or full-time, you're an elected official, you're an alderman 24/7.
I don't get what the point of that.
Well, the point is,
comment is.
you consider it a part-time
Part-time
position.
mayor.
It's a part-time position per se, but
Oh, I
You're
said
you're always an alderman, I'm always the mayor.
Yeah, I have no issue with you
That's,
being
you know,
part-time.
No, I know,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, people say it's a part-time
Oh,
position.
I see, yeah.
It's not
No,
really
it's not.
part-time.
I mean, I don't think being an alderman is even.
It's not part-time. 'cause you
Sometimes
get
it
calls on
feels full-time
Sundays.
during
It
this
is,
cycle.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
I don't know if anything can be done about this now, but we're talking about these little numbers here, and there's one that's really just, I've actually lost sleep over it. It's in reference to the police department, and I want to go ahead and I want to, for future, I think we should keep this in mind here, and that's dispatch. We're spending over $500,000 right now on the dispatch center. And I have had conversation with other departments, Brad being one of them, and Waukesha seems to be doing a really good job, and I believe that we can probably save a tremendous amount of money there. I understand the argument about the fact that Mabel knows everybody here and is, you know, she can give more information than maybe somebody at Waukesha can, or that there's a 2-minute difference or something along those lines. But if we're going to start talking about dollars and cents, we really have to start looking at these bigger numbers also. So I want you guys to really consider that, okay? Thank you.
what do you want us to do about it, Kevin? You want us to cut it? I'd cut dispatch out right now. We're double paying for it. I voted against it before.
Go ahead, Lou.
I'd like to make a motion to remove dispatch from the 2019 budget,
Which part of dispatch do you want to remove?
the equipment upgrade.
Which is a placeholder because we really haven't determined if we're going to do
Correct,
it.
and I believe that in our upcoming discussion about the PD, which is scheduled for next week, that'll be one of the items that we reevaluate or have as a line item discussion. I'd rather have that taken out of the budget and if need be, put back in. A lot of the information that that Kevin mentioned, at least in my mind, the high call volume on the inbound originating from cell phones that will always go to WCC as current policy states. And the last number I heard was upwards of 93% of inbound calls go to WCC and then have to be repositioned back to local dispatch. I've heard also some estimates that it could take anywhere from 38 to 47 seconds for that delay. And that transfer leads me to change my position in regards to supporting dispatch being maintained locally. So I'd like to see that allocation removed from the 2019.
No, that's in the capital improvements. Yeah, it's not part of the, it's not part of the levy.
It's in here.
Yeah.
The dispatch equipment is in here, but it's funded for debt, so there's no levy impact of pulling it out, but it is a project that's enumerated in the budget to be paid for debt, which the impact of that would, the debt payments for interest and principal would start then in 2020, so you'll see the levy impact of that in 2020. Does that make sense?
Only
Just
if
so
it
you
stays, right, but only if it
understand how it's
stays
in
in. But what my motion is to remove the capital expenditure of the equipment upgrade for dispatch from the budget for 2019.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Now, the one concern I have about this is we're voting on something that wasn't agended, per se. I mean, we talked about the budget, but the actual dispatch system, I'm not sure what the, I mean, with Stan not being here tonight, I'm not sure how that. Yeah. And we really haven't had a chance to collect all the information. This guys kind of came as a surprise.
Is this Fund 408, the capital improvements? Is that what we're talking about?
The one for the 550,000 to.
The equipment is in Fund 408. The dispatch operations are in the operating budget of the police. As you recall, we recently, the council passed a resolution to retain our dispatch services before we started talking about the police department facility. And we did that so that we could have that decision to know what we needed to build into the new station. if you want to reconsider the dispatch service, I would probably ask that the council make a motion on that, because we just recently had a resolution on that.
Right.
And voted on it, so if you want to revisit it, I think that it would be appropriate to make a motion and have vote on the revisiting of that subject, since we just had.
We should debate
that.
the subject of dispatch before we debate the subject of the equipment.
So would you like me to change the motion to include a revisiting of dispatch services to be included in our overall PD discussion next week?
No, because what I'm thinking is we're not voting on the budget tonight, we're just discussing it. So what I'm thinking is what we need to do is, when we meet next week, which is part of our discussion, actually on the 20th, prior to voting on the budget, we will have to vote on dispatch. And then at that point, we could do whatever we need to do. Is that correct? Go ahead.
Previously, and I don't remember which year, but council had acted on something through resolution and then decided, and I can't remember exactly if it was the very next council meeting or the one after that, they wanted to revisit it. When a resolution is passed, you've kind of set things in motion. You can revisit it, but it does become, as what Sarah is saying and the mayor, you need to take action to revisit it, put it back to reconsider. That's what it is. You need to reconsider your previous action. And that's what you would need to do if you want to reconsider keeping the dispatch service. And then that, obviously, depending on where that goes, that plays into the budget and the new police station and so forth. But it is a reconsideration of a previous motion.
So
what Alderman Kowalski is talking about is taking the money for the new dispatch equipment out of the budget. Right. He's not talking about removing the dispatch service, which is what the resolution was. What my thought is that we have to make a decision on the dispatch service before we pull the money out of the budget for the new equipment. If we want to if that's what wants to happen, if we look at it, reconsidering, are we going to still be a dispatch service? Because if that's still
can't have one without the other.
Can't have one without the other. If we're still going to be a dispatch service, then we have to still keep that money in the budget.
We're not spending the 500 right now. It's
No,
just,
we're not.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my second.
I think we just hold on it until we determine, but what we want to do then is discuss it next Tuesday.
Right.
And then if it's determined, then we put it on the agenda for the following Tuesday, the 20th, to say, yes, we're going to keep it, no, we're not going to keep it.
do I need to make a motion for reconsideration of dispatch services, since
No.
there's already been a resolution in support of that?
No.
To make sure that it's,
No, we'll rediscuss it in 2 weeks. Yeah, you don't have to change it.
At that meeting, then if you want the council to act on it from there, I think
Yes.
there you would need a motion to reconsider it at that next week.
As long as it's properly noticed for the meeting.
Yeah. I
It'll be on
think
the
we
committee of
need
the whole
that
agenda.
before it can come back to the council floor,
It'll
is
be
what
on
I'm
the committee of the
saying.
whole agenda. So that'll be
So I-
another thing, so that'll be
Correct.
added on to our list of things we have to decide.
okay, so
Tuesday.
as we stand right now,
It'll be on the agenda.
Yeah.
okay.
Are you going to withdraw your motion then at this time?
I withdrew my second.
Right, but,
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay,
Either
thank you.
Withdraw in a second.
Better way to do it.
So that's something that we'll have to, I mean, that gives a chance for everybody to have all the facts together before we make a decision, just by making a decision. Not based on dollars, but on whatever else.
Can I make one clarifying thing here too? When we're talking about tonight, we're talking about the budget, and you're right, that is part of the capital budget. To the mayor's point, it's not part of the levy.
No.
When we talk about the capital budget, we're gonna discuss the debt service items separately as they come up next year as well, or even next week or whatever. Passing the budget, and with that capital project in there, does not write in stone that that capital project is going to happen. So when you're talking about the police station, when you're talking about streets next year, when you're talking about everything else, these kind of things have to come back to council. You have to vote on funding them through debt service. So if it's in the budget when we vote on the budget, it will come back to the council before we borrow money for it, because it has to be an approved part of the budget, or approved part of the debt resolution. Just so you know. And I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so, I mean, even if it's in there, it really doesn't, it's there, but it's not there.
The levy-funded items are the ones that,
Right.
you know, when we vote on the budget, we are setting a tax levy. So the levy-funded items, we have to have sorted out, because that sets the tax levy. The debt service or impact fee funds or any of those other items that are funded separately than that are items that you guys can still discuss as they come up.
Okay.
You can change its funding source, you can change the project.
So there, can I ask you a question on that? So there's $550,000 that we're currently talking about right now. There is $7,650,000 or $635,000 associated with the PD itself.
Correct.
In the facility. All of those numbers associated with the 2019 capital project totals $13 million, all of which is not necessarily debt service.
Debt service is $2.2 million, and then when we looked at the capital budget, you could see how each thing was funded.
Right.
So those things that are funded by debt service need to be funded through a resolution of the council before we borrow the money. And it has to state what it's for. So if at that time you've decided you don't want dispatch equipment, or the police station isn't what that number is in there, it will be revised to what the dollar amount of the project is and the approved projects at that time.
And we're not dealing with any of the levy dollars associated with debt service based on the anticipated capital improvements.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's for the 2020 budget. Okay, is there any other discussion on the 2019 proposed budget? Go ahead, Derek.
I'm going to bring back up the street sweeper again. It's part of the capital improvements, but it's a $310,000 item. Matt, I don't think you were here when we talked about the capital stuff. I'm not maybe you were.
I don't remember.
Is that a?
Anyway, it was it's $310,000 for new. It's 10 years old. They'd spent $12,000 in repairs through August. I don't know what the current total is on it. But when I do the math on it, it says that street sweepers are usually from 7 to 10 years lifespan. That comes out to $31,000 to $44,000 a year we're going to pay for a new one, plus any additional upkeep and maintenance. What I'm saying is in a year where we're looking for money to keep the budget down, this might be something that they could put off and just keep making repairs to it.
The street sweeper is funded with fund balance, so it's not a levy impact again.
50,000 it says is.
Oh, 50,000, thank you, yeah.
It still costs money
Yep,
though.
I'm sorry, I was just
Yep.
peeking at.
Either that or I was gonna pick on the end loader for snow removal, but that's all levy 225. But what I'm saying is when I look at things, if it costs more to fix it than it does per year to own it new, that's when you start making your decision. You don't necessarily, you've got, like I said, if you divide it by 10 years, it's $31,000 a year. They had $12,000 into repair and maintenance on it. It's a way for us to take a pretty good chunk out of the what I consider to be a deficit, because we're going to raise taxes this year. I'd like to consider that, just because it doesn't seem like $12,000 compared to you're going to pay over 10 years $31,000 a year. It seemed like a no-brainer to me if it was my money I was spending.
You want to comment on
I'd
that,
like to
Mark?
make a motion to remove I'd like to have Mark come up and defend it if he wants to. I don't.
Before you make a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear. We talked about it once, but I want to hear it again, I guess.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the street sweeper. Street sweepers are one of
Put the
those
mic
things
up.
that. I didn't put it that low.
I know you didn't, but. You got it.
Is it on now?
That's on.
Thanks for the comment.
Yeah. So, over the years, we have found out with street sweepers, a couple of years ago, we did try to extend the life of one of our sweepers, and come the next spring, it was about $35,000 to $40,000 to fix it. We ended up putting it in our backyard and having to lease a piece of equipment. So that's why we're sticking close to the 10-year life on this. The fleet has reviewed the piece of equipment, and is there a recommendation that it is to be replaced, and that's why we're doing that. I understand what you're saying, that you know, so that what we had for expenses, but we're anticipating that this piece of equipment will not run past its 10-year life, or I think it's a year or so over right now, type of a thing. So that's why we're recommending for the replacement of that. So when it comes to the street sweepers, we need them out as much as we can through the summer because it's part of our MS4 permitting. Everything that we collect, all of that's weighed, and it's part of our report back to the state for the removal of suspended solids. So it plays into that. In the fall of the year, they're huge. We need to have both of them out every day once the leaves start coming down. Once again, it's part of our MS4 program of getting the leaves collected because that helps reduce the phosphorus that goes into the lakes. So it's you know, a fairly critical piece of equipment. It's unfortunate they have the costs that they do with the shorter lifespan, but that's the life of a street sweeper.
How many street sweepers do we have?
We have 2 of them.
And so this one would be gone, we get a new one, right?
Yeah.
And how old's the other one? The newer, how old's the newer?
We just gotten that a couple years ago.
Okay.
You know,
How much does it cost to lease one?
We paid, I believe it was about $18,000 for about a month and a half.
Kind of got you, but, you know, it's they're not a popular item, I wouldn't think, you know.
You can't just go
You
rent
can't
that at,
just
like,
go,
rental
you can't
center?
just go to a rental center and get a street sweeper.
Lalaberg's.
Go ahead, Lou.
So I think, you know, the street sweepers help maintain an aesthetic within our community as well. But you mentioned the suspended solids.
Suspended solids and the
leaves.
phosphorus.
Some communities have the ability to take your leaves and put them on the street and then have a piece of equipment come and take those away.
That's a different animal.
Yeah.
That's 2 different things that,
It is,
that
but
you're bringing up.
can that animal also be a street sweeper and then in the fall take all the leaves?
So right now, the leaf collection, and as Alderman Zwart knows, he had a constituent just raise this question, so I put together a memo that walked through that. But so in the city, we utilize John's, who's our refuse hauler, and they do 20 yard waste collections a year through the summer months to pick up grass clippings or any type of yard waste. So the collection in the fall, it's been explained to me. I reached back out to a couple former employees and older city residents to see if the city had ever had the equipment where they went around and vacuumed and collected the leaves, and was told, no, we did not. So it's one of those things that, you know, we utilize a contractor for that service. So if we want to take over that service, we would have to go out and obtain the equipment to do it. But more importantly is the use of labor. So, you know, the collection of those leaves, it's very intensive, obviously, middle of October through November, which would take up all of the crew time that we have based on discussion. I spoke with the city of Watertown. It was referenced in the constituents' question to Alderman Zwart. And plus one of our foremen is a former Watertown employee who was very knowledgeable on that. And we discussed what the cost would be and the time constraints, and we looked at that, and at this time, based on the numbers that we were looking at, it's more economical to utilize the contractor that's going around picking it up. But more importantly, once again, and I see this in the other communities where they do rake it out in the street, you look at the rains that we've just had, so all that rain's going through all those leaves that are breaking down and putting the phosphorus into the lakes. So, you know, once again, you do all this other work, and because of that you can have those issues. So there's, you know, a few other things that I'd talked about in the memo, and I'm sure that we can provide that out to the council, you know, this week so that you can see it. But at this time, because of the makeup of the equipment that we have, the number of employees that we have. Now, that's not saying that this isn't something that, you know, we're not talking about internally. I mean, there's been a few things that, you know, I'm sorry, I'm getting into a different
We're getting off
subject.
subject on the street sweeper, yeah. It's just basically, it's not a street sweeper. Tom?
Forgot already. Anyway, we used to have a rake 'em in there. We had a big old thing that came around and sucked up the leaves in the gutters many years ago.
When was that? I don't remember that.
Well, I think, I know exactly when it was, because
Is that around the time of Footloose?
that was Footloose, yeah. I can remember Timmy Stapleton and I playing out there, and he jumped in there, and here comes that the sweeper down the thing there. So it was about quite a few years. Go back and talk to the Gartskis, because I think they probably are around. And then, when we trade this, do we trade the other one in or make it a Zamboni for an ice rink, or what do we?
We put up any used equipment on an auction.
Just equipment. I mean, you tear down the parts off that sweeper, or you just try to sell that or trade it in for?
We would take it to auction for sale, the
sale.
complete sweeper.
Okay, so you might get a couple bucks out of it or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Derek?
I think since we just bought one a couple years ago, I'd like to make a motion to push this off a year, since I'm trying to keep the taxes down. So I'd like to make a motion to remove the street sweeper from the budget.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Mike.
Mark, so right now you're only working on one?
No, we have two, no.
Oh.
We have two pieces of equipment that we own. The one that was just replaced a couple years ago, we did try to stretch that out and ended up not being able to utilize it and had to lease a machine. So that's where we decided that we were going to try and be as close to the 10-year as possible on the replacement of that piece of equipment so that it didn't occur again. So that's why this recommendation is there now for this piece of equipment based on, Fleet looking at it and, the lifespan of the equipment to have it replaced now. Yes, right now it should be replaced.
Any other comments? I have a question for Sarah. If we push this back 1 year, how does this affect our capital budget for next year, which I know was going to be short the way it was?
Yeah, I mean, when we looked at when we did the 5-year capital improvement plan, our capital needs identified for next year were, I think, $400,000 or $500,000 more than what we are spending now. So it would just
gets
add
moved
that
though,
on.
right?
It'll move
the
it.
200,000 or what? 250,000 would just get moved to next year.
Yes, and
50,000
then
would be
your-
reduced from the
And then
levy.
your $400,000 or $500,000 over is now,
But the money didn't leave us; it's still there.
50,000.
The
Is
50,000 that
50,000
would
the
be
levy?
levied would be what-
50,000 is the levy.
Okay, so that,
If you don't spend it this year, it'll go into our carryover bucket. You will not be taxing for it this year, but if you put that piece of equipment back in next year and want to fund it the same,
So,
it just basically,
You're just kicking it down the road, but you're
Well-
also
well, what you're doing is you're taking, say, instead of having a 2% or 2.8% increase this year, you drop that down to maybe 2, but the next year you got a 5. So instead of having
not
a-
necessarily. Next year's a new year.
But next year, we're already short. That's the issue of trying to balance it and make it a smooth transition instead of having it small and then a spike. Because then next year, you would have the schools coming on and all these other things, and next thing you know, then the property taxes go way up. I don't want to bring the schools into it because that's not our concern. But doing it in a balanced approach gives it a smooth transition instead of having a spike.
Well,
That's what.
Sure,
we
I
look- that's
understand
I
what
look
you're
at,
saying,
'cause
but
I
also
don't like to have spikes.
the
So-
planned spending for 2020 is $400,000 more than 2019. And the year after that's an additional $300,000 on top of that. So when we're talking about that, basically, we would save it this year. It could go in our carryover. You would have to add it to the needs for next year. So it would increase the amount that you tax next year. Decrease this year, but it'll increase
It'll look
and
good- it'll look good
multiply
this
that
year, but
amount
look
next
bad
year.
next year, potentially.
I'm only focused on what's in front of me right now. I'm looking down the road. I understand
I
that.
look down the road 5 years.
Sure. Okay, well then, let's take another look. We would only, if we push it off 1 year, then we wouldn't be replacing street sweepers in 2-year increments down the road
How
too.
old is the one we got? The newer one?
I don't have it right. in
You said it
front
was
of me, sir.
two
I think it was
years?
a couple years ago, we replaced that.
Be nice if it was every 5 that we had to do one. So maybe that would smooth things out too, so. Right now, we're working on this year's budget and we're talking about an increase. And we spent $12,000 maintaining, it's gonna cost us a minimum of $31,000 a year if it's a 10-year lifespan. The math favors us just repairing the one we have, in my opinion.
If it can be repaired. You had another, someone had a comment over here? No? Any comments over here? So we have a motion and a second on the floor to pull the street sweeper out and the tax levy of 50,000, but move the from reserve to next year. Is that basically it?
It would just be to remove it.
Remove
and
it
then
from,
we'll
remove it, and then we'll
have to
figure it out
revisit
later.
it at the long-term plan
Okay.
next year.
So your motion is second on the floor. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Miller?
Nay.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Nay.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Okay, so that's pulled out. Any other comments or any other suggestions for, go ahead, Karen.
I have a couple quick questions for John, so don't fall asleep over there.
Do you want him to come up?
Yeah. Okay, these are a couple things that we talked about in the overview, and I guess they were still bugging me a little bit, but the replacement of the tables and the chairs of the 4,700, you know, I get that. That probably needs to be done once in a while, but if some of this stuff is damaged, does security deposits, or people charge security, part of their security deposit if stuff is damaged?
Are you referring to the community center right now?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Community center.
Well, we in our rental policies for the community center, we don't take a security deposit. We have a set fee that they pay, and they sign a contract that they're responsible for any damage that they may, or we can prove that they did. So if someone gets on a table and is jumping around and it breaks, it's clearly occurred due to their guess, and they'll be charged for that replacement.
Has that happened?
Not that example, but I have others. But we'll leave those alone right now.
How is it easy to collect that from them?
So far, we've been successful collecting.
Okay, I'm just thinking, you know, most church basements have tables and chairs that have been there for like 20, 30 years that don't need to be replaced. And I just wanted to mention this as far as, you know, making sure that if these are damaged and need to be replaced, that someone's responsible for that, whether it's through a security deposit or.
Yeah, we do hold our customers to replace if we know they damage it. The replacement and the addition of tables is for the overall use of our community center. It continues to grow, different styles. Size is probably the better way to put it.
Okay.
You know, you only have so many banquet styles versus the 5-footers and the types of uses that are being there. So as we get more use and more dynamic in that facility, you need to be able to meet some of those accommodations. So, you know, a table alone is a nice one that's going to take the wear and tear and the use that we have are $800-900 a piece. So we're only talking about a couple to improve our services this year.
Okay. My next question was on the carpet. I wouldn't move to take that out, but is there a possibility that can be a hard surface instead of the carpet, so we don't have to replace it every 6 or 7 years? Is there a reason why it's carpet?
Well, this is the original carpet, so when we moved in. The reason for the carpet is that particular room, as you've all been in, is room C, has the AV equipment. It's used for more meetings and other types of events, but as we've grown, meetings have turned into lunch meetings and other things, which has brought more food in there above and beyond our rentals. So a hard surface is something that we're considering. That area does get used for other recreational program surfaces, that a carpeted area is actually more appropriate, but we could probably adjust. So a harder surface is an option for us.
Okay, so the carpet's not there like for acoustical purposes for any reason?
It does help, but I'm not comfortable justifying it from an acoustical perspective.
Okay, I would just say if we can consider doing the hard surface, so we're not replacing it every 6, 7 years.
Okay.
And then one thing that popped out at me that I'm sorry that we hadn't talked about before, but the drop ceiling in the lower level of $12,000.
Yes.
Do we really need to do that? I mean, I'm really excited about what's going on at the community center, and it's just been a great place, and people just have all positive things to say about it. But that room looks really good the way it is. Do we need to spend the $12,000 to put in a drop ceiling?
Well, do we need to? Need and want are two interesting words, right?
Right.
The use of the community center in that particular space has grown significantly, from programming to rentals to wedding receptions, etc. The drop ceiling will provide acoustical benefits there. It's very echoey because it's a metal ceiling. If you've been in there for any meetings or programming, it can be difficult if there's multiple things going, multiple people and multiple discussions, small groups. So it'll complete the room. It will make it acoustically better. It'll be a viable rental space. It is being rented now for weddings, but because we have so many programs and so many other things happening at the upper level, we're getting more requests for rentals in the lower level because the space is not available. So I think it would definitely benefit the community center to finish that space. Originally, it was a white box space, and the demand's there for it to be used. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put it in.
What is it mostly used for now, though? I mean, I know there's
It's used for
like
recreation
graduation parties
programming.
and-
It's used for class space and use. It's used for testing through the school district. It's used for weddings and prep areas, a variety of different things. It's very multifunctional.
The question about acoustics, the floor and the ceiling can comprise up to about 50% of the acoustical value in a room. So to convert to a hard floor or not to finish the ceiling has big acoustical impacts, and I think we've seen some acoustical challenge in the community center previously that have had to be addressed since the community center is open. So whether you do a hard surface on the floor or you do a drop ceiling, if you opt either way, you can do acoustical tile to help evaluate or to mitigate some of those issues. So I don't know if that's something that you've looked at for some of these uses. If you convert over to a hard floor and do some acoustical tile to help offset that and increase some of the usability, would that impact some of the requests in this budget?
Well, you may be confusing the carpeted and hard surface from one space to another.
No,
So the carpeted surface that Alderman Spielberg was referring to earlier is in the upper level.
Right.
That could be converted. We have acoustical tiles and things in place at that level now. So that's definitely feasible. The lower level is a hard surface now.
Right. And
So the acoustical ceiling, the drop ceiling is a more cost-effective approach than applying acoustical tiles throughout that room. Acoustical tile systems can be extremely expensive if you have them designed appropriately. And it would be more costly than the drop ceiling, and the drop ceiling would meet the needs that we have. That's why we went that route.
I mean, is this, you said it's not necessarily a need, it might be a want. Is this something that we could put off for another year?
I'll ask for it again next year, and if you say no, I'll ask for it again the year after that. So it's up
I'd like
to
to
you.
make a motion to remove it from the budget.
Which one?
The 12,000 in the drop ceiling.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
What is that space, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What is that space being used? I mean, you said recreational stuff testing. I mean, are there weddings being held in the basement? I can't imagine a lot of weddings being held in the basement.
I'll try to be more specific. We have Taekwondo classes, we have dance classes, we have aerobics classes, we have yoga, we have weddings are renting the upper level and the back lawn. So they're renting that additional space for brides, grooms, et cetera, for getting ready for events.
So it's
used by the school district for testing, for classes and programs, and they also bring groups over there for actual education. So, those are some examples. It's used for almost every type of purpose you can think of.
It sounds to me the space as is without the drop ceiling is appropriate for the uses it's being. If you told me that there was a ton of weddings and professional meetings down there, I think it might be a little different. But, you know, if people are doing Taekwondo down there, they don't need this beautiful drop ceiling in. You know, they can do with a more, I mean, look, you go to the Roots Coffee Shop, they have an exposed ceiling with the HVAC. That's kind of the look. And I think that's a good motion, Karen. I think it's a good idea. And, you know, John, you do a good job in your budget in defending it, but, I mean, when you tell me you're going to just keep asking for it year after year, that kind of worries me when you say that kind of stuff.
Because it's needed.
Well,
that's why I asked for it. If I don't request information in my budget if it's not needed to improve the facility and the results.
Well,
if it's a decision to cut the budget and eliminate that opportunity, that's your prerogative. So I will ask again next year because it is needed to improve the service. And the best way for me to allow you to understand what it's like is you actually need to go to that facility, you need to use the facility like the other people, and you need to have a meeting in there and try to have dialogue and discussion, and you'll understand. So right now you're questioning what I think is needed for the facility without you really knowing.
Well,
I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it.
I absolutely disagree with that, and I don't want to get into a conflict with you, but I've been in all those parts of those buildings, and I don't think it's that bad. And you're telling me that they're doing Taekwondo and testing for the schools down there. I'm telling you, I don't think you saying I'm just gonna keep asking for it year after year, even though we're saying it's not necessarily a need right now. We do represent the taxpayers, and we're saying, look, this is one of those things that, you know, we might be able to do without this year. And, you know, you could keep asking for it, but I think that's a bad approach.
Okay, we have, okay, go ahead.
I just go, you know, that initially was put through the council as becoming a restaurant downstairs. That was their big selling point, to sell that building in. And so I guess it's still vacant for that, but.
Go ahead, Lou.
So it is getting more use. Is the current state of that room impacting the feasibility to continued use pattern that you see? So is somebody going in there now going, you know what, I thought this would be okay in there, and it's not meeting the need, the echoing and the acoustics in there and the aesthetic in there, I'm not going to come back. Are you hearing that from the users?
Not from all users. I'm hearing it from some, specifically in meeting environments.
And those meeting environments are revenue generators?
Correct.
So it could potentially, not finishing that space out now could impact revenues associated with rental. I know it's a hypothetical, but
No,
based on some of the...
typically, if people have a negative experience with acoustics for the types of meetings or programmings that they're renting for, they go to a different location the next time.
Yep.
Can I tell you what's going to happen this next year with those groups? No.
Does the school pay for?
No, they do not.
That's the reciprocal.
That's part of the reciprocal. That's correct, Tom.
That's what I want to know.
I have a question for John.
Yes, sir.
When the building was first built, it was planned to have that room finished off eventually, correct?
There were 2 spaces in the lower level that were not finished when the building was done.
Right, because at that time, we didn't need to finish it.
Right. The growth of programming and demand, we've finished the floors and the walls, et cetera, so they're not white box now. They're actually usable spaces. One room, neither room has ceilings in them right now. One room, we're not recommending it because of the scheduling and the programming. It's not needed. The room that I'm recommending is, based on the use, is needed. So Tom was accurate with his comment that when we originally did it, we were looking at that as being potentially a restaurant. Restaurant's probably a strong word, a smaller style cafe type facility that could serve the beach and other things. We reached out to a series of vendors and companies, and the feasibility for them to be successful generating revenue and be able to put all the equipment and everything in didn't fiscally make sense for them for a 3-month operation.
Right.
So we've grown and we've turned it into recreational meeting and additional spaces.
Right.
That's the reality of how we got to where we are.
Go ahead, Lou.
This is my final on is, Karen, I think it's a good thing that you identified it. If this was exclusively a workout space or a taekwondo space, I would support eliminating it out of the budget. But based on the multiple uses and in the meeting space specifically, because acoustics is a major driver in use of that type of space, I'll support leaving it in.
Okay. Any other? Did you?
I mean, we're trying to tighten our belts this year. We're trying to build a
we try to
public
tighten
safety
our belts
building.
every year.
I know that, but
And it's either it's 1 year. Or
my
another
motion
year.
stands.
The point is, I think that John's trying to make too, is the $12,000 that's invested will be recovered through fees. This is one thing that we do have fees on, and the more the room is rented, the more fees we get. So it's an investment. It's more of an investment than it is a expense,
I understand.
guess.
The room still looks great the way it is. Looks great.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry, this has been a very frustrating budget cycle for me. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, if I'm just getting older and more ornery, but it's a nice thing to have, sure. But we said a year ago, we were gonna try to tighten our budgets when we were looking at the police station. We know, no matter what happens with the police station in the next few weeks, our taxes are gonna go up. Our taxes are going up now, and we try to make little incremental cuts, and it just seems like we can't do it. And, you know, whether it's drop ceiling or Wi-Fi for free for the community, we just refuse to make any kind of cuts. The items I identified in my memo, if you add them up together, account for about $250,000. If we did something unique with our inspection services, we could probably at least save another $100,000. But we, for whatever reason, as a community, as a council, and as department heads, just won't do it. And I'm very frustrated. Look, the drop ceiling's great. It's gonna look great. John did not say we were gonna lose people coming in. It's a nice thing to have. People may not come back, but we have other parts of the facility that they can rent if they don't like that space. Hey, well, it was a little loud down there. Maybe it's better for Taekwondo than our business board meeting. We're gonna rent the other space upstairs next time. I didn't hear from John, unless John was gonna correct me, that we are going to lose people renting the space if we don't put the drop ceiling in. Are we gonna lose people? You can't predict that, I don't think, so.
It's a difficult thing to predict, but I can track it and I can see if there's repeat customers or not. And I could have data for you in the future on it.
We just,
but I don't have that tonight.
Right, we finished that space, what, 2 years ago? Was it a year ago?
No, we finished, we did the flooring at the beginning of 2018, so this year.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, we've only had it for a year. I mean, I think we should seriously consider, this is one of those, another area where we can do a cut. You know, let's see, and he's gonna bring it back next year anyway, he already told us that. So maybe he'll know more information by then about, boy, we had people that showed up January, February to rent it, and then they hated it and they never came back. That would be good information for us, and then maybe the 12,000 is worth the expense. But, you know, if we're gonna actually look to try to tighten this budget, we actually have to make cuts, and we just don't seem to really wanna do a lot of cuts, so.
Sarah, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just would like to respond to that, Alderman Rozak. You know, I think your characterization of the departments and the council refusing to make cuts is not quite accurate. The departments bring in budgets that they scrub them, and we scrub them before they're here. So there's a lot of work done before you ever get the budget. And I give that credit to our department heads because they really are putting together the best that they can to provide the services at the best cost. And this group is excellent at that. So you struggle when you go through the budget to find things because they've done such a good job at putting together a budget that is as fiscally conservative as we can. And when you get to items like the drop ceiling, it's the professional recommendation that this is something that is a need. Now, it's a policy call if you want to leave it in there. Absolutely, that's your decision. But you've got your professionals that are explaining the rationale for it, and then it's your choice. You know, and whether that's something you want to move forward with this year or not. So I just wanted to address that because I think it's a mischaracterization to say that we refuse to make cuts.
Look, Sarah, our job is to look at the budget carefully. Our duty is to the taxpayer, not to whether or not we hurt feelings for the department heads. And I don't think it's a mischaracterization. I've tried to cut the budget every year. We've had some success, but year after year, we try to make some incremental cuts here and there, and we just can't do it for whatever reason. And that's my comment, and it stands. I'm not misfairly characterizing anything. I'm just saying, look, we keep trying and we can't do it. So, you know, when we want a new police station and we want to add this stuff and we try to make any cuts of any significance, all we get is pushback. And look, we represent the taxpayers, and that's our job, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remove the, what is it, 12,000?
Yes.
$12,000 from the Park and Rec budget for the drop ceiling. Any other comments? Seeing none, call the roll.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Miller.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Nay.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Okay. Any other suggestions? What we're going to do tonight is because since there's been some significant cuts, we're not going to proceed with voting on it and setting the levy. We'll wait till the next meeting for that, which is what we had talked about. Well, I understand that, but I still think it's best then we've been debating this for 3 hours. I think it's best to leave it sit. Go ahead, Lou.
Do you have kind of a running tally of what has been cut thus far? I know in regards to Park and Rec, there was a larger amount asked for Northeast Regional Park Development. I think it was like 700,000.
Yeah, but that was cut out a long time ago.
Correct, but that was part of our cutting process, right? That was, if you take a look at what we've ultimately thinned out from the initial discussion to where we are today? A sense of where we're at?
Yeah.
I have everything for the budget. I didn't changes with me, but I did bring,
Right.
What is that?
Yep,
Yes.
can't hear you.
That was pretty significant.
And if you'd pull the mic, please.
Every
It's
time
not
I do
tall
that,
enough.
Every time I do, the thing falls off.
You're just not tall enough.
Okay, so with the changes that you made tonight, so originally from the committee of the whole, the changes that we have to the budget that was presented are removing the COLA for elected officials, that was minus $855. The library Wi-Fi went in and out. The removal of the community center cable and the addition of the devices,
Yeah.
the $300.
So
So
it's
that
about
netted
$1,000.
$1,025, right? You have $50,000 for the street sweeper, $12,000 for the drop ceiling. So right now, when the bottom line before the mill rate increase was 15 cents, now you're looking at 12 cents. Okay, so the total tax change of an average house, you decrease that by about $6. So instead of 37, it's 31.
About 10%?
It's the total percent change was 2.8, it's now 2.2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give you a heads up of where we're at right now. So, yeah, we do have the numbers, so we are prepared, so anything else?
Well, I
need
mean,
to
if,
know?
if the council is comfortable with voting on it, we could have a motion to approve the 2019 budget, if that's your preference. It's on the agenda.
I'm not comfortable doing that until we have that discussion on the PD and the dispatch.
That's what we want to wait for, then we wait. Okay, so we'll move forward. We will not set the property tax levy either.
Correct.
Move on to staff reports.
Nothing this evening.
Reports and comments from Alderman.
I've got just one thing. This Sunday at 11 o'clock, 11/11, we are having our annual Veterans Day ceremony at Veterans Park. It's the 100th anniversary of the end of the war, to end all wars, World War I, but they were off a little bit on that one.
Yeah.
So, come on down, see what goes on with us, and we're going to have a little open house at the our new clubhouse.
Any other comments?
I just want to tell Sarah and Lori and all the department heads, thanks for all your hard work. I mean, it's really evident that you guys put a lot of hard work into this, and we do really, really, truly appreciate it.
Okay.
Kind of on Tom's comments, it is Veterans Day. I would like to say thank you to all those who have served in the past and moving forward and keep us safe. Also like to say thank you to everybody who voted today, and I'm sure everybody is glad to see today come and go.
Yeah.
So.
Any other comments?
Except for the television stations.
Seeing none, reports and comments from the mayor. I really don't have much to add today, so we need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. We do meet next Tuesday to discuss the police department.